Before the fear kicks in, make sure you subscribe and click that bell notification so you won't miss anything. We had to move house quickly. My new job required a move across to the other side of the country, and even then I was required to be away for days at a time, leaving my wife and son alone. The trade-off, however, was the house. An architect's wet dream in steel and glass, situated luxuriantly in 10 acres of its own private woods. Open plan, ultra modern and very sleek. Despite the clean and elegant lines and the fantastic panoramic view of the garden blending into the forest, I was left with a sensation of slight unease and exposure. The glazed open plan ground floor was not dissimilar to being in a fishbowl. My wife would dismiss these feelings. Far too used to living in the city, she would say. It's going to take time to adjust. But we were pretty isolated though, being approximately 3 miles from the nearest village. And I did not like leaving my family by themselves for any length of time. However, the installation of garden flood lights, a monitored alarm system with panic buttons and a long barrel revolver coupled with a wife who could shoot like Annie Oakley went a long way to alleviate these feelings. One of the first things all 3 of us would do after moving in was explore the woods surrounding the house. It was hot, high summer, so the fragrant evenings and nights never totally got dark. The woods had such an earthy, rich scent after summer rain, and a light breeze rustled through the heavy foliage, which made them deliciously cool. Moths and bats flitted between the trees. Nocturnal creatures went about their nightly routines, and there was the constant sound of the wind through the leaves. One such evening, about 2 months after we moved in, I had a rare evening when I was on my own in the house. Cancelled business trip plus wife and son staying with grandparents on a pre-arranged visit. I decided on an evening walk that took me to a region that we had not yet explored. It was in the far northwest of our land, where the forest was particularly thick and wild. The trees grew so densely that it felt oppressive and gloomy. I could not see more than just a few feet. After a good half-hour walk, the woods suddenly opened up into a small grassy meadow, and to my surprise, a building stood in the middle of the clearing. It was like one of those World War II concrete pillboxes. The slitted windows had iron bars and I could see sealed internal shutters. Puzzled, I walked up to it slowly. On rounding the corner, I could see a solid riveted iron door slightly open, with a brand new yet mangled heavy-duty padlock laying close by on the trampled grass. I noticed large iron bolts set at the top and bottom of the door were also later additions, along with the padlock. And there was a distinct path cut across the meadow from the door to the woods on the opposite side of the clearing from where I had entered it. I approached the door and stopped. Silence. The very woods seemed to be holding its breath. No birds. No wind. I stepped closer. Despite my sense of growing unease, I was certain the structure was empty. A sudden chill went down my spine when it suddenly struck to me as strange. Why were the door bolts on the outside of the door rather than the inside? I pulled gently on the door and was immediately assaulted by the smell inside. It reminded me of the big cat house at the zoo. A movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. My eyes were drawn to the dark gap in the trees where the path led. The branches were moving around the opening even though the evening breeze was non-existent. My blood ran cold. This is private property. No one should be here and no one should be padlocking anything on my land. I jumped at the warning call of a bird. A sharp rustle derailed my panicked train of thought and sent me fleeing the way I came. I just ran for it. Branches whipped and clawed at my face and limbs as I blundered, panting and heaving through holly bushes and brambles. I looked behind me as I ran and I saw nothing, but I could hear something crashing through the undergrowth behind me. My lungs were burning and I thought my heart was going to burst through my chest as I broke through the edge of the woods into the clearing where stood the house, where I'd be safe. I almost fell through the back door, slamming it shut behind me, and with fumbling fingers set the deadlock and collapsed with my back against the door. As my heartbeat slowed, reason began to seep back in. Oh, for Christ's sake, you stupid bastard, it was probably a bloody badger or a frightened deer. I glanced at the numerous bleeding scratches and scrapes on my arms and legs and my torn up clothes. Oh, what a state. Grabbing the door handle, I hoisted myself up only to nearly fall down again with a shout as I saw through the panel of frosted glass in the top half of the window there was a blurry, indistinct head and two glowing eyes. Then it was gone. What the hell? I stumbled into the kitchen to get a drink. As I gulped water down, two things immediately struck me. Firstly, when I flicked the ground floor lights on, I was fully visible to whatever was outside. Secondly, in the lit interior, I could see nothing but black outside. I flicked the lights off. The outside was now illuminated by a nearly full midsummer moon, bathing everything in a silvery light. I turned back to the kitchen cupboards, now in search of whiskey. Christ, I needed a drink just to calm my nerves. The outside security light suddenly flicked on, casting shadows. I jumped out of my skin and spun around, and nearly cried with relief as I saw half a dozen deer slowly picking their way across the lawn. Their elegant beauty and tranquil demeanour calmed me down, and I took one deep, shuddering breath. The deer re-entered the woods and disappeared. The security light flicked off. I was left standing in darkness, while the moonlight outside almost seemed to be encroaching into the house. Wearily, I turned to get my whiskey and froze. In the moonlight at the very edge of the woods, I could see a figure moving slowly. It seemed to be taking great care to stay just out of the range of the floodlights, so not to trigger them. It was traversing across the very edge of where the woods met the lawn. Whatever it was, it stood upright, but hunched over, balancing on its two dog-like legs. It then moved with such fluid predatory grace, suggesting power and control. It paused, sniffed the air a couple of times and swung a huge dog-like head in the direction of the house. I could see the eyes reflect the moonlight, making them glow as they fixated on where I stood. My knees gave way as I collapsed behind the kitchen counter out of sight. I have no idea how long I remained crouched out of view. I was unable to move. My mind raced over what just happened. And you know what? What really scared me the most was the cunning. It knew to stay out of range of the floodlights and how to do it. My bloody gun was 2 stories above me, locked in a safe. I got cramp in my legs, which finally forced me to move. The external floodlights remained off and all was quiet. I risked peering round the edge edge of the counter. Pressed up against the 10-foot panes of glass was a huge black figure, spread-eagled with large claw-tipped hands pressed against the glass like giant spiders, which maintained the creature's balance. Its head, bowed between heavy muscular shoulders, faced me with those intense glowing eyes, seemingly burning into my very soul. It then tilted its head, ears pricked high on its head to one side in a most dog-like of movements. One clawed finger twitched, tapping on the window, and the head tilted the other way. I lunged for the panic button situated by the stairs. Immediately the house alarm screeched and wailed and the floodlight snapped on. What I saw illuminated at that window will haunt me till my dying day. A vast muscular frame covered in rough salt and pepper fur, broad chest tapered down to narrow waist terminating in a pair of the most powerful springy dog-like legs. A wolf's head with blue mineral eyes meeting mine with shocking intelligence. Lips curled up briefly in a snarl, flashing gleaming white fangs. Then it seemed to rip itself off the glass, disappearing into the woods in 3 long leaps. I had a lot of explaining to do that night. The police, the alarm monitoring company, my wife had all been triggered by the panic alarm. I told them nothing. False alarm. Circuitry tripping due to teething problems. What could I say? How the hell could I explain a 7-foot jacked up dog man was tapping on the window at me? Jesus. I'd be in one of those white jackets that does up at the back before the end of the day. In the cold light of next morning, my fear had been replaced with straight outrage. I ain't going to put my family or home at risk any further without getting to the bottom of just what the hell went on in the woods last night. It was a bright sunny morning, and recovering my Taurus long-barrelled revolver from the gun safe in the loft space, I left the house with the intention of driving to the northwest boundary of my woods and finding that clearing and building again. As I approached my car, it was immediately apparent that the front driver's side tyre was flat. Stupid bloody new cars and their lack of spare tyre. I took the gun back into the house and locked it away, and I then drove the car with the run-flat tyre to the village garage in hope they would be able to do something about it. I wasn't at all surprised to see the garage was a typical nondescript concrete building with a small petrol forecourt, an office attached to a large workshop garage with a couple of metal padlock storage containers out the back. Here we go, I thought. As my car drove up, a short middle-aged man with a cheerful demeanour came out of the huge open doors. Behind him I could see a car up on the ramps and another over an inspection pit, and I clocked the usual various equipment and tools scattered about. As I got out of the car, I was greeted with a cheery, "Morning, sir." He noticed my flat tyre straight away. "I see you're in a bit of a fix. Not to worry, we'll get you sorted." The bloke glanced over his shoulder, then back to me. He then said, "Shouldn't take more than half an hour to sort out. You're welcome to wait. Good reason to put the kettle on. Do you want a cuppa?" He turned round again and looked into the gloom of the workshop. "Hey Leon," he shouted out, "we got an excuse to get the good biscuits out, mate." I heard a phone started to ring in the workshop office. The guy said, "Excuse me for a moment," and with his welcoming smile he disappeared through a nearby door. I just stood there waiting, in the hope that they'll hurry up if I hang about. I heard a tapping sound which immediately set my heart racing. There was some movement in the darkness of the garage which caught my attention. In the shadows I could just make out a man in overalls sitting near the back of the shop. He turned his head slowly to face me. I found myself staring into a pair of blue eyes that seemed to glow unnaturally in the dim interior. The man rose up slowly. He was moving deliberately slow to flex his full height. The bloke was huge. He was well over 6 feet. He had broad muscular shoulders narrowed to a lean waist. His overall sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms grooved with muscle and dusted in hair. As he stalked towards me, carefully stepping around tools and equipment on the floor, I was struck at how gracefully quiet he moved for such a big bloke. He stopped about 10 feet away from me and crossed his forearms across his massive chest. His hands were huge. I could see his hair was dark salt and pepper, and there was a scruff of beard on his face. His deep-set blue eyes never left my face. As his nostrils twitched, he sniffed a couple of times and then he tilted his head to the left. Those blue eyes narrowed and his gaze became distinctly predatory. The lazy smile spread across his features, revealing sharp white teeth. He then tilted his head to the right. A low growling chuckle rumbled deep in his chest. Realization drained the colour from my face and turned the very blood in my veins to ice. He then opened his mouth to speak. Before he said a word, the other little guy returned. "Leon, mate, I need you to do a recovery. You'll need to fill up before you go, as it's going to be a big job, mate." The older, smaller man looked at me and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting, I'll sort your tyre out now." I thought to myself that anxiety must still be showing all over my face. I flinched a bit as the big man deliberately passed behind me. He put his huge hand and clapped it on my shoulder, and then he said in his husky voice that was barely audible, he whispered,
"I look forward to seeing your wife next time."
And then he was gone. While the older little guy started working on my car, he said, "Don't mind him, mate, he's a bit of a character, our Leon. Right devil for chasing the ladies." The geezer fixed my tyre quickly. I paid the bill, I got in my car, I drove off, and I did not stop. Thanks for watching. Go check out my online horror shop, Clown Merchandise, to protect you from demons. Click the link below. One of you listening right now is gonna have me knock on your window in 4, 3, 2,